I'm Christina Foxley, Director of Events, and I'm pleased to welcome Mary Lou Wiseman and Al Jaffee here tonight to talk about Al Jaffee's Mad Life. Jaffee's 55 years of work for Mad magazine has made him a cultural icon, but the compelling and at times bizarre story of his life has yet to be told. A synopsis of Jaffee's formative years alone reads like a comic strip of traumatic cliffhangers with cartoons by Jaffee and captions by Freud. 6-year-old Jaffee was separated from his father, uprooted from his home in Savannah, Georgia, and transplanted by his mother to a shtetl in Lithuania, a 19th century world of kerosene lamps, outhouses, physical abuse, and near starvation. He would be rescued by his father, returned to America, taken yet again back with his mother, and once again rescued by his father, even as Hitler was on the march. A cliffhanger of a life deserves a page-turner of a biography, and that is what Mary Lou Wiseman and Al Jaffee have delivered with Al Jaffee's Mad Life. Since we'll hear all about Al's life in a moment, a bit about Mary Lou. Mary Lou Wiseman is an award-winning journalist and best-selling author. Her essays, feature articles, interviews, and film and book reviews have appeared in many publications, among them the New Republic, Newsweek, Glamour, Vogue, Atlantic Monthly, and the New York Times. She and Al have been friends for more than 30 years. Following tonight's presentation, Mary Lou and Al would be happy to take your questions. I'll be walking around with this microphone, so please wait for that before you speak. And then they will sign copies of their book for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. Please join me in welcoming Mary Lou Wiseman and Al Jaffee.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see you all here. What you've been looking at as you were seating yourselves, this is a slideshow that contains just a very few of the original illustrations that Al has done for this book. There are, in fact, about 70 in a style that no one would have called Jaffee-esque until now, but it's the style he chose to tell his life. This book was really about 35 years in the making, although I don't usually spend that much time writing. I met Al in the 80s when we both lived in Provincetown, and we got to be good friends. And Al is reticent about talking about his life, and I was a journalist at the time, and I wasn't reticent about asking him. And so one day when we were taking one of our walks together, he used a phrase that intrigued me. He referred to himself as a reverse immigrant. And that's all it took to get me going. And we talked and talked, and then I wrote a profile for a magazine, a nice magazine, but with a very small circulation, and we were both kind of disappointed that the story didn't go further. And then we got discovered a couple of years ago by someone who read that magazine article and said, hey, this needs to be a book. And we thought that was just fine. It's been simmering in me for a long time. So take a look at this slide. This is the picture of the Hamburg railroad station. What went on in this scene constitutes the defining moment in Al Jaffee's life. What you see is Al holding the carriage in which is his baby brother, David. And you see one brother heading off on the tracks in one direction and another heading off in another. And I'm going to read you, I think the only time I will read to you because it's not quite bedtime, but I'm going to read to you about that scene. Where was his mother? Harry, his 5-year-old brother, was running on the tracks. Bernard, 2.5 years old, was waddling off in another direction. David, the baby, was screaming in his carriage. Standing on the platform, holding tightly to the handle of the carriage, Al didn't know what to do. Should he leave David and run after his brothers? Should he try to push the carriage through the crowd? Adults, exhausted and confused, labored under bundles tied with string, lugged satchels, leather valises, and cardboard trunks, trying to find their place on platforms so long they seemed to lead to nowhere. None of these adults was his mother. He was paralyzed with fear. "Mama," he yelled, "where are you?" "Mama," he cried, "come back." It was chaos, Al remembers. It is a moment that is as clear to me today as it was then. I realized that I must not rely on this woman for my survival. I must not. Either we are all going to get killed, or those of us who stay alert are going to survive, because she doesn't know what she's doing. I realized that she was irresponsible, that I knew better than she did. I knew I could not put my life in her hands. I knew I was on my own. Suspended between two worlds, he understood that this was no time to look down. Al was 6 years old. And where was his mother? Eventually, of course, they got on the train. This is the Hamburg railroad station. The year was 1927, at a time when Jews all over Europe were doing everything they could to get either to Palestine or to the United States. Al, Jaffee's mother, Mildred, picked up her 4 kids from their comfortable middle-class home in Savannah and took them back to Zarasai, Lithuania, a shtetl in the northeastern part of the country from which she had emigrated and for which she was homesick. So there you have the moment around on which, the hook on which you can hang really the rest of Al's life. But we really ought to start now back in Savannah, where you were, from which you were taken, and where you first fell in love with the funnies.
Yeah, Savannah was sort of a paradise for me because, it has palm trees and beautiful squares, and I had a lot of freedom because my mother was usually somewhere that I wasn't. And so I wandered around. I went to all kinds of neighborhoods. There were times when my mother had to call my father hysterically, and they would get the police and try to find me and bring me home. But I loved Savannah because it was just a place of great adventure.
Weren't you kind of a bad kid?
Well, I was mischievous.
Like lighting fires. I mean, arson.
Well, we had a fire station across the street from us, and there was an empty store, and I got all the kids. Everyone loved to see the fire engines come out, so I figured I can get them out. I got these kids into the store, and I said, "Watch," and I got a bunch of paper and some matches and lit it, and the smoke started pouring out of this building, and the firemen came out. The heavy machinery did not come out, but I really caught hell for that one. But I think it was an overactive creative mind really that was working rather than mischief. I just enjoyed, I guess, being a kid in Savannah. And of course, when my world was turned upside down was when I was taken from this paradise to a place in Lithuania that looked like it was on the moon. I mean, dirt roads, nothing was paved. The only pavement was, not pavement, but the only thing that had anything on the roads was the town square, which had cobblestones. And at night, it was pitch black everywhere because kerosene lamps didn't throw much light. So it was like going back into, even though I was too young to understand what a prior century was, I think that's what it was. It was totally different than what I had known in the United States.
Well, when Al was taken, literally kicking and screaming, from Savannah by his mother, the mother's pretense was that she was homesick for this place called Zarasai, and that she wanted to go back and visit her family, and she would be back soon. I mean, it wouldn't be super soon, since it takes, nearly a month to get there and nearly a month to get back. But the expectation was that this was I don't know if you can have a vacation in a place that's 20 degrees below zero, but she was going home. And she, in fact, had no intention of ever returning. So, but of course, for a child of 6, he had no sense of time. So tell about leaving, being taken from the house, and about your experience with because this is Al's earliest experience with cartooning with your dad.
As far back as I can remember, my father would, on Sundays, when he wasn't working, would get the Sunday funnies, and he would take me and my brother Harry and sit us down on the floor, and he would create absolute magic. He couldn't draw, I don't think, on his own, but what he could do is copy anything, and he would copy for hours as we asked him to copy this one and copy that one. The Cats and Yammer Kids, Jiggs and Maggie from Bringing Up Father, and so many of the cartoons that appeared in the papers in those days. And it was just such a regular ritual that I couldn't imagine life without it. And then one day I realized that we are being transported because all our luggage is packed, and there's a car waiting, and we're going to travel. And even though my father assured me that you're only going to be gone a short time, just to visit your mother's parents, family, I said, all right, I'll go, but on one condition. You have to send the funnies. If you don't send the funnies, I'll never speak to you again. And that he did. Eventually, we wound up being there for 6 years, and I think it was the comic strips that kept my connection to America alive, and also taught me how to read. And so this was probably why I wound up being a cartoonist. I couldn't imagine life without it.
When you arrived in Zarasai, you have to imagine a kid dressed in American clothes, wearing Keds, stepping off a boxy bus that made a weekly trip from Kaunas to Zarasai, where there were no cars. There were, horses and wagons and drovers and peasants and scythes and stuff like that, right? And so Al gets off the bus, and he doesn't speak a word of Yiddish, this is Zarasai is a town that has about 3,000 people in it. 2,000 of them are anti-Semites and 1,000 are Jews. So, and they lived in pretty segregated lives. So the first thing they did to test Al's mettle was to beat him up. Want to talk a little bit about those circumstances?
Well, it's a sort of a curious anecdote. I walked out in the street dressed like Little Lord Fauntleroy,